Hey, hey everybody. This is Donald, and I'm going to be teaching tonight. We're going to be looking at a text out of the book of 2 Kings chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. So I'm giving everybody a little bit of time to join me here and give everybody time to get on here with us. But I appreciate you joining, and I know there'll be some others join us tonight. But what I'm wanting to do tonight, I'm going to preach in a minute on the makings of a great mother. And we'll look at that. And if you're on here, let me know. Send me a message and let me know. Say hi, say hello. But today I went to our associational meeting that we have every week in we met over at Salem Baptist Church about reopening up our churches here in Murray County and Whitfield County. And so I see several of y'all are joined us, Barbara and Rhonda, Judy. But what we're going to do at Antioch this coming Sunday on Mother's Day, I'm going to preach at the church. And I will be preaching live from the church. There'll be a couple people join me. And then on the 17th, I'm going to actually meet at the church. Hey, Troy and Barbara, I see y'all, Debbie Clark, Debbie Sales. Thank y'all for joining. But what we'll do is the 17th, I'll be preaching live from the church, and we're going to invite some people to join us. And we're going to do a soft opening of the church, a gradual reopening, and let people join us. What we'll do is we're going to stagger the pews, and we're going to have them kind of like in the V shapes, zigzagging or like W's, and we'll stagger all of our pews and have hand sanitizers and masks and all that stuff. And so on the 17th of May in Antioch, we're going to work it out and start letting some people come in and join us. And I'll start preaching from the church on Sunday mornings. And I know we heard good news the other day about Ricky Talley, that he had actually got somewhat better. And so that was great. And I see Tony's joined us, and Tina has joined us. But in a minute, what I want to preach on is the makings of a great mother. I've been doing a lot of reading throughout the Bible and looking at different mothers in the Bible. And so as I did, the last couple of days I preached on some stuff about mothers. I see Kelly's joined us, Linda has joined us. But a few weeks ago, I preached on the woman who God had blessed her with a son, and then that boy died, and we looked at her faith. But today, I want to pick up the story of this woman before she ever had a son. So if you'll look with me in the book of 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 8. 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 8. And Lord willing, my intentions right now of what I've studied, Sunday morning I'm going to preach out of the book of Mark chapter 7 about the woman who God healed her daughter. She was a Gentile lady, and she's the one that said, Lord, just give me the crumbs. The crumbs will be enough. And so Sunday morning I'm going to preach on her. But tonight I want to preach about this Shunammite woman, 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 8. And it fell on the day that Elisha passed to Shunem. There was a great woman, and she constrained him to eat bread. And so it was that oft as he passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread. And she said unto her husband, Behold, now I perceive that this is a holy man of God, which passeth by us continually. Let us make a little chamber, I pray thee, on the wall, and let us set for him there a bed, and a table, and a stool, and a candlestick. And it shall be, when he cometh to us, that he shall turn in thither. I want you to think about something with me. You know, there's some people, they've just got what it takes to be a mother. I mean, you know, this woman here, the other day, when I was reading this, later on down here, it says here that she told her husband, look in verse 10, she said, let us make a little chamber. Now, I don't know about you ladies, but here at my house, when my wife says, let us, normally that means me. The other day she said, I always mow our monkey grass, and I mow it with my mower, and when I mowed it this time, my mower went down a little too far, and I killed a bunch of it. And she's been saying stuff about replacing that monkey grass, and the other day she said, I think we need to replace that monkey grass. And I told her, I said, I believe your me means me. And then she was saying, we just got a bunch of dozing done here on our land. And she said, I think we need to plant some grass seed. And I told her, I said, I think you mean I need to plant some grass seed. So this here of ladies saying us and we, it goes back a long time ago. This lady right here had done this several thousand years ago. And I think that's a making of a mother and a making of a lady. And also, as I got thinking about this, the makings of a great mother. I had 5 little points here that I want us to look at as we see this. You know, a mother, if we tried to pay a mom for what she is worth, I mean, we would have to pay her like $76,000 to $100,000 a year just to pay her for what she's worth on a 40-hour work week, not even counting overtime. I mean, think about it. A mother don't punch a clock. A mother don't take no days off. She can't call in sick when she's got a child that's sick. She can't have a bad day and say, well, I'm not going to be a mom today. And all through the Word of God, we see some wonderful women who are great women. And here's the thing that I think that makes a great woman is that she's a godly mother. Godly women make great mothers. Godly mothers make great women. I think they go hand in hand. And the story that we look at here today is we see this woman here in 2 Kings 4. In verse 8, the prophet of God had been coming by there, and it opens up and it said, it fell on the day that Elisha passed through Shunem. There was a great woman. Here we see this woman's, her great identification. We see this woman, people knew who she was. People knew who this woman was in her community. She had a pious reputation. You say, preacher, what do you mean when you say she had a pious reputation? This woman was not a loose woman. This woman was loyal to her husband. She was loyal to God. This word great here means that this woman had a deep reverence for God. And here's something that I saw in this that God showed me. This woman didn't just have a love for God. This word great here, this word of reverence here, also implies that she had a hatred for sin. You know, most great athletes, they love to win. But even what drives them more than loving to win is that they hate to lose. They have a fear of losing. Somebody that's really godly, a lady that really loves God, a lady that's really loyal to her husband and loyal to her family. Not only do they have a love for God, they have a hatred for sin. This woman protected her reputation. They didn't just talk about her as being a loose lady. She lived a clean lifestyle. She lived a lifestyle that was pleasing to her community. She lived a lifestyle that was pleasing to her God. And she lived a lifestyle of reverence. And people knew who she was. And they knew that she had a godly and upstanding reputation. I want you to think about that. Your reputation and your character is something that you got to build. It's something that you actually got to protect. But not only do we see her reputation, but we see her plenteous riches. This lady was rich. She was wealthy. She is one of those people in the Word of God who came from some sort of wealth. You know, the ones that took care of Jesus in his travels up on this earth were godly women. Anytime you read about Jesus Christ in the Word of God, going from city to city and people taking care of him, it was always women. Lazarus' sisters, they took care of Jesus. Read about the women at the cross. There were a bunch of them. Read about the women at the resurrection. They were a bunch of them. These women were wealthy, and they were willing to give their riches to Jesus Christ to help him live his lifestyle and do his ministry. And this here woman is another one of those type women. She was wealthy. We don't know how she got wealthy. We don't know where she got her riches, but she wasn't stingy with them. You know, there's nothing like seeing somebody that is rich, but they're also generous. This lady here, she was a wealthy lady. We see her pious reputation. We see her plenteous riches. But then the second thing we see, we don't just see her great identification, but we see her gracious invitation. Elisha passed by. This woman got to watch him. She got to sing. And we see here her observation and keenness. You know, there's a lot of us, we look, but we don't see. We look at people in Walmart, but we don't see them. We look at the lady running the register, but we don't see them. We look at those people down at the hospital and we don't see them. We look at those people in the restaurant, our waiter, our waitress, or whoever, and we don't see them. The world is full of people that are passing us by, and we look at them, but we don't see them. This lady didn't just look at Elisha, she saw him. She watched him as he passed by. She observed him as he was passing by. You know, we need people in our churches. We need people in our families that they don't just look, but they see. She saw that this guy had a need. And then we don't just see her observation and keenness, but we see her outreach and her kindness. It says here, look what it said, she constrained him to eat bread. I mean, this lady went out. I don't know if she done it through a servant. I don't know if she done it through her husband, but she constrained. This means that she really pressed him. She wasn't going to take no for an answer. And she said, you're going to come in my house to eat. And it says there in verse 8 that not only that, we see her outreach and her kindness. Look what it said. And so it was that as often as he passed by, he turned in thither to eat bread. You know, every community had a place where people hung out as kids. Think about where you hung out as a child if you lived in a community where people hung out. I lived on the corner of 4th Avenue as a child, and there was an empty lot right behind my house. Where the co-op is today, the feed store, I lived straight in front of the feed store. North, on the other side of my little street there was a empty lot. All of us kids stayed there and we played, and then most of the time we all ended up at my house. My mama didn't mind kids coming to our house and eating and hanging out and play. And then when I got older and went to other places, there's always somewhere people could hang out. There was always some mother or some family that didn't mind people being at their house. This was that type of mother. She said, I want you, now you listen to me, you're not imposing on me. I want you in my family and we're going to feed you. Did you ever have anybody do you that way as a kid? Did you ever have anybody to invest in you? Have you ever invested in somebody? I think right now of all the people that invested in my life when I was a young preacher guy. You know, folks, I want y'all to listen to me, and I'm saying this with every bit of sincerity that I got. When I first started preaching, I didn't own one garment of dress clothes. I had my regular clothes that I wore, and that's what I had. Maybe after I started going to church, I might have bought some kind of church clothes to wear to church. But I'll never forget, my preacher used to tell me when I first started preaching in 1980, Ron Stevens, he'd say, son, you going to preach tonight, you need to wear a tie. I didn't even have a tie. The only tie I'd ever wore was when I went to the junior, senior prom. And I'll never forget when I first started preaching, I had one tie. I mean, I had to go to my wife's uncle and get him to tie that tie for me, and it was one of them slip knots. I took it off and I hung it up, and the next time I preached, I put that same old tie on. Then over time, people would buy me ties. People would give me ties. I go in my closet right now and look, and I probably got over 100. I'm actually got them over here on a blanket rack in front of my where I'm at here in my bedroom. I've got a blanket rack that's filled with ties. I probably got over 100 ties in my closet. I look in my closet right now, and I probably got about 30 white collared shirts and button-up white shirts and all kind of suits and all that. And you know what? Over my lifetime, many people gave me those things. Many people. I remember that first little Bible that I got as a young preacher boy. I'd got saved, and somebody came up and give me a little Bible. I wore that thing absolutely out. You know what? The makings of a godly person is they invest in others. There's nothing like having a godly mother or a godly woman that'll invest in other people. And this lady invested in Elisha. But then the third thing we see is her godly inclination. Look with me in verse 9. And she said unto her husband, behold, now I perceive that this is a holy man of God which passed by us. This woman didn't just observe and didn't just invite the man of God in. She had inclination. You know what? Women are the greatest people in the world to have intuition. I mean, they have got an inclination. You ladies, God's blessed you that way. My problem is I believe in everybody. My problem is I want to see good in everybody. I want to trust everybody. I want to believe everybody. It's hard to be a pastor and not trust people. It's hard to be a man of God and not believe in people. My wife, she don't trust nobody. My wife, I mean, she's told me, you wouldn't believe how many times over the years she's told me, she said, you better watch out. You better be careful there. And I would, actually, there's been times I'd get mad at her and I'd say, you don't know what you're talking about. And then after a while, that thing would prove to be true, just like she's said. You know, I don't have that. I don't have that intuition. I believe that's something that God give mothers. I believe that's something, you know, your mom tells you, hey, you better not do that. I never forget one time my mom, I was going to go fishing with my cousin. I was going to go fishing with a couple other guys. I was just 16 years old. I was going with my cousin and my uncle, another guy. My mom told me, said, you don't need to go. There ain't no reason you need to be doing this. And I said, Mama, we're just going to go fishing. We're not going to do nothing. We're going to go to Cartersville. We're going to go to Lake Altoona, and we're going to go fishing in a boat. Here's what my mama told me. She said, you go down there, and you get in trouble, you're on your own. Folks, it was just a fish day. We went that morning. I couldn't buy my fishing license. It was the first day of fishing season, and the place was out. They didn't have a license. We went on fishing. And guess what happened? A deer come swimming across the lake. My cousin thought every deer out there should be a dead deer. This was in the summertime. This deer, or this was in the springtime, this deer came swimming across the lake. Next thing you know, that deer's dead. And the next thing you know, there's game wardens everywhere, dogs everywhere, boats everywhere, and we're making our way back up to Chatsworth, Georgia, all the way from Cartersville. And the next thing you know, behind us, there was a game warden, and there's some little blue lights come on in his truck. Make a long story short, $500 later, a year's probation, and spending about 4 hours in the jail down there in Cartersville. My mama's intuition proved to be right. I'm here to tell you, folks, I would have given anything if I'd listened to my mama. All she told me, she said, son, there's no reason you ought to be going fishing with them guys. See, my mama knew me, and my mama knew them, and she knew that us together, they wasn't nothing good about that. I paid my own $500. I worked down at the schoolhouse in the summer that year. I made $90. I walked from the, I was 16, but I didn't have a vehicle, and I worked down at the schoolhouse. I got my check. I walked down to the courthouse, cashed my $90 check, and I got back $30, and I'd done that till I paid a $500 fine. I've never got no kind of trouble like that again. Wouldn't even dare shoot a deer today. I've got deer out in my yard. There's probably some out there running around right now. I feed them. I watch them. I've never killed a deer since then. And if I'd have just listened to my mama, that would have saved me a lot of trouble. This lady looked, and her intuition, she had an inclination. And she told her husband, she said, hey, there's something about that man. And she said, I perceive that this old boy is a man of God. You husbands out there, you need to listen to your wives. You guys out there that are dating some girl, you need to listen to your girlfriend. There's just something about a mom. There's something about women that God gave you an intuition that's just part of your makeup. And I've learned to respect that when people tell me stuff. And I've learned, especially when my wife tells me something. And then the next thing that we see here, as we look at this, we don't just see her identification, it was great. We see her invitation, it was gracious. We see her inclination, it was a godly. She said, this is a man of God. But we see her intention. Here's what God showed me. I love this as I saw this. Look at verse 10. Let us. There she said, hey, we're going to build. Do y'all think she actually built that house? Do you think she got out there and drove those nails into that pieces of wood, or she kind of maybe just directed her husband? I know how it would go down here on 770 Callie Jones Road. I kind of know who would be doing the sawing. I know who would be doing the hammering. I know who would be telling me this and that. But I believe she told her husband, said, I want this thing built right here. I'd like it to be built this big, and I want it this way. And while he was doing all that, she went and picked out her a bed. She went and picked out her a stool. She went and picked out her a little table, and she picked her out a candle, and she said, what we're going to do, we're going to build this man of God an addition. And I mean, they got busy. Next thing you know, they built this addition on the side of this house for the man of God. And folks, I want you to think about that. But then we see her affection. I mean, it said here, when he cometh to us, that he shall turn in thither. Every time old Elisha passed by, he already had him a house. He already had him a room on that house. He didn't have to ask. All he had to do is open the door. There he had a bed. There he had a table. There he had a stool. He had a lampstand. He had everything that he needed that he could rest and relax as he made his way And what he would do, he was traveling from Mount Carmel, and he would travel down to Samaria, and he was making this journey. And this woman lived on the main thoroughfare where that when Elisha passed, he could stop in there and he could rest. But here's the part God showed me. We don't just see the addition here that they designed and the affection that she displayed, but we see the association that she desired. You know what this woman wanted? She wanted the man of God to be at her house. Here's what I believe God's saying to us. We got to make room for God. You've got to make room for God in your family. Moms, dads, if we want God in our family, we got to make room for God in our family. We got to make room for reading our Bible. We've got to make room for praying. We've got to set aside the time to go to the house of God. We got to set aside the time now in these days to watch Facebook or to watch these videos. We have got to intentionally make room for God in our lives. This woman said, hey, I want to be associated with God. The closest that I can get to that is allowing the man of God to come and to be in my house. You know, over the years, I've had women be so good to me. I've had ladies cook stuff for me. I've had people give me stuff. There's some of y'all right now that's watching this video. All the time you're giving me little cards. You're giving me little things to Red Lobster. You're giving me little cards over to places to eat. And you've been so good to me over the years. You know what I found out? People's realized that's a good way that they just want to be close to God. And one of their ways of being close to God is taking care of God's man. They feel like if they take care of God's man, that just shows that they want to be close to God. They want to get all of God that they can get. And you know, I've had people years ago, I had these little widows, I'd visit them in the rest home, and I'd go to these little people's houses, these little old widows live in just little old shacks on the side of the road, and I've had them to give me $1. I've had some of them, their little hand would just shake and they'd reach out and they'd want to hand me $1. And one time I talked to my pastor about that and I said, Brother Walter, what do you do when these people offer you money? And I said, and I know they don't have it. What do you do? He said, here's what I do. He said, I take it. He said, because they're giving it, they want a blessing. They want to bless you. And he said, normally I'll take it and I'll put it back in the offering plate of the church. And I found out when somebody wants to bless you, bless God, you need to let them bless you. These people's wanting to be close to God. But here's what this lady did. She wanted to be close to God, and she made room in her family for the man of God. And she said, you have got the right to come here and to stay in my house. Moms, if you want to have godly children, you've got to make room in your life and in your home for God. If you want to have a godly husband, make room in your life for God. If you want to be godly, make room in your life for God. I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of men helped me in my life. There's several men that I owe a lot to my ministry to. But you know who I attribute my ministry to more than anybody? When me and my wife were dating, she had an old gray-haired granny. Her name was Lily Muse. She lived up here where I live at now. She lived up in front of me. And she was old ever since I knowed her. She is old even back in the late 70s and early 80s. And I'd go up there sometime, and I had a job where I worked a lot at night, or I had these old jobs where I rotated shifts, and I had a lot of time off. And I'd go up there, and it'd just be Granny up there, Denise's granny. And I'd go in, and she'd have her Bible, that big old Bible, big print Bible. She'd be reading that thing. She'd say, son, I'm praying for you. And I said, and this was even before I started preaching. And then once I started preaching, she said, boy, I'm praying for you. I'm praying God to use you. And I said, man, he is using me, Granny. I'm preaching now. She said, boy, I'm praying God to use you. Next thing you know, I ended up being a deacon. And she said, boy, I'm praying God to use you. I ended up being a kids director, and she'll say, son, I'm praying God to use you. I ended up being a youth minister, and she said, boy, I'm praying God to use you. And then later on, she died, and I ended up being a pastor, and I've got to pastor several churches around here, and I've even went to places. I've stood up and preached to literally close to 800,000 people before. And I've traveled. I've preached revivals in New York. I've went to Texas to preach, and I've went to a lot of different places to preach. And you know, one of the reasons why God has blessed me and let me do these things that I've done, there's old gray-haired grandma lived right up here in front of where I live now. She'd pray for me, and she invested in me. And I never seen her ever get up much and shout in church, and I never seen her say a whole lot in church. But here God's let me preach, and I've seen literally hundreds, if not 1,000, saved throughout the years of my ministry. And bless God, every soul that's ever been saved, they attributed to that little old gray-haired grandma that prayed for me and invested in me. And these women that have stood by me and prayed for me and stood by me and let me make mistakes and let me fall on my face, and they didn't turn their back on me and they didn't abandon me. They just, many times Donald Cantrell's failed, and many times I've messed up, but bless God, they just loved me and they prayed for me and they stood by me. I'm so appreciative of the women that God has placed in my life. You know what else we see? We see this woman's glowing inspiration. Her heart was abundant for God. We need moms, and we need mothers, and we need women that's got an abundant heart for God. But not only was her heart abundant for God, but her home was available for God. Make your home a refuge for God. Make your home a haven where when people come there, they can just sense God. They can feel it through your kindness. They can sense it through your generosity. They can sense it in how you talk. They can sense it in how you act. There we saw the makings of a godly mother. None of those were hard things. None of those were things that none of you couldn't do. These same attributes can attribute to a man. The makings of a godly mother. The makings of a godly person. Make room for God. Make room for God in your heart. And make room for God in your home. The Bible is filled with women that love God. The Bible is filled with women that had a heart for God, that opened up their home for God. You know, and I'm going to close with this. If it weren't for godly women, Jesus would have had it a whole lot rougher than he had it as he walked upon the face of this earth. Many godly women invested in Jesus Christ. They gave him money. They supported his ministry. They opened up their home for him. They fed him, and I believe they took care of him. And they made sure they tried their best to invest in the ministry of Jesus Christ. I love you. I appreciate you all listening. I see Kevin Shelton had just tuned in with us, and some of y'all that don't know Kevin, if you'll look, he's on here right now. Go to his page and watch him. He's a great preacher. And Brother Kevin, I appreciate you joining us. And I always try to watch his sermons. He does a great job. I think he's up in Saudi Daisy. And soon as all this is over, Brother Kevin, I want you to come down to Antioch and preach for us. I know you pastor up there, and I know you got some stuff. That's right, Craig. Boy, I miss my wife's grandmother praying for me. If I called anybody to pray for me, and I know they'd pray for me, it'd be some of the godly women that God's put in my life. Well, I'm going to close, but I really want to challenge some of y'all to go and to check out Brother Kevin Shelton's page. Listen to him preach. I believe you'll thoroughly enjoy it. Sunday morning, I'm going to be on here at 10:45 preaching from Antioch Baptist Church, and I'll be preaching live. We won't have an actual, per se, church service, but I'll be preaching live from the church, and we're going to try to have some singing. Folks, I love y'all. If I can help y'all, I will. Message me. I'll pray for you. I want you to pray for me. God bless you. I love you.